There's a phrase still moving through the trucking industry. You can hear it on CB channels today, passed between drivers who couldn't tell you where it came from. Some of them are too young to have watched the show. Some of them were born after it ended. But the phrase survives anyway, the way certain things do. Not because anyone decided to preserve it, but because it lodged itself somewhere deep in the culture and refused to leave. Do it like Pruitt. And later, after the show that made it was gone, do it like Pruitt used to do it. There's a truck behind that phrase, a green Kenworth double sleeper built in 1974. There were 4 of them once. 3 are gone. No confirmed location, no documentation, just silence where the trail ends. The 4th one had 7 or 8 owners, changed engines multiple times, got repainted so many times that whatever it once was disappeared under the layers. For a long time, it was just another truck on the road, carrying no visible sign of what it had been. Then, one night in 2006, a man in Sparta, Wisconsin was on eBay looking for memorabilia, and there it was. This is the story of Movin On, what it meant, what it built, what survived, and what's still out there moving whether anyone can prove it or not. It started as a TV movie. NBC aired In Tandem on May 8, 1974, a pilot about 2 independent truckers, an odd pairing of a grizzled veteran and a college-educated kid who'd decided the road made more sense than whatever came next. The ratings were good enough that NBC ordered a series. They called it Movin On, and for 2 seasons, it followed Sonny Pruitt and Will Chandler across the country in a green Kenworth, hauling loads and walking into other people's problems the way cowboys used to walk into other people's towns. Claude Akins played Pruitt. Frank Converse played Chandler. Between them, they had enough screen presence to carry what was, at its core, a very simple show. 2 men, 1 truck, a different crisis every week. What made it work wasn't the plots, it was the authenticity. Akins and Converse didn't fake it. Before production began, both actors obtained their chauffeur's licenses, the forerunner to the commercial driver's license, and they drove the truck during filming. Real highways, real traffic. The truck in the show was also the truck doing the work. The production moved like a circus. Season 1 shot primarily on the West Coast. Season 2 shifted east. More than 20 states over 2 seasons, the cast and crew relocating sometimes 1,000 miles between episodes. Film reels shipped back to Los Angeles daily for processing. Breakdowns, fires on the rigs, weather delays. All of it absorbed into the schedule because the show had committed to something that most television of that era wasn't willing to attempt, putting the actual machine on the actual road. 44 episodes, 2 seasons. It ended in March 1976. But somewhere in the middle of its run, something happened that the producers hadn't entirely planned for. The show became something the trucking industry claimed as its own. Real drivers watched it. They identified with Pruitt, the independent owner-operator, navigating rates and loads and the specific indignities of a system that needed you, but didn't particularly respect you. These were, as one contemporary account put it, gypsy truckers, free agents in an industry that was starting to feel less free by the year. Claude Akins told the story of a dinner interrupted by the Secret Service. President Ford was in the hotel. His wife Betty was a fan. Ford wanted to meet the man who played Sonny Pruitt, and having done so, told Akins, "Now I can tell Betty that I know more about Movin' On than she does." That's the distance the show had traveled, from an NBC pilot to the President of the United States claiming bragging rights over his wife about a truck driver on television. Kenworth didn't just loan a truck to the production. They provided 4 of them, 2 per season, new each year. What they provided was significant. The W925 was the first double sleeper Kenworth had ever built. The company had developed it specifically to meet a demand for long-haul operators who needed more than a single bunk for team driving. The show got it first. Or close to first. The pilot used a 1973 model, dark green, single sleeper. When the series went to production, Kenworth supplied a 1974, the double sleeper, the one that became the show's visual signature. Green paint, arrow logos on the doors, the name S. Pruitt lettered on both sides. It is worth noting here that the exact model designation has never been fully settled. Sources listed variously as the W925, W925A, W900A VIT, and W925 VIT. Overdrive magazine investigated the question and found no consensus among fans, truckers, or researchers who had looked into it. The uncertainty is documented, not accidental. What isn't uncertain is what those trucks were asked to do. This wasn't a production that built replica rigs for close-ups and kept the real machinery parked safely off camera. The trucks were driven, hard, across real highways in real weather, with the actors behind the wheel for most of it. The production coordinator for Season 2 described the logistics of keeping the rigs running across a shooting schedule that moved constantly. Breakdowns addressed in the field, parts sourced locally, the trucks treated the way working trucks get treated because that's exactly what they were. When production ended, Kenworth didn't reclaim them. The trucks went back to work on the road. Which is to say, they went back to being trucks. 3 of the 4 have no confirmed current location. A single comment on a trucking news site, unverified, no documentation attached, places 2 of them with a company called Chamblin Trucking out of Stockton, California, sold through Stockton Kenworth not long after production wrapped. The commenter's family was apparently involved. The trail ends there. No subsequent ownership records, no auction history, no enthusiast accounts placing them anywhere after that point. This is not unusual. Working trucks don't get preserved. They get used until they can't be used anymore, and then they get parted out or scrapped or quietly retired somewhere that nobody thinks to document. The studios didn't step in. Kenworth's official materials, including their own retrospective on the show, acknowledge that the locations of 3 of the trucks are unknown. That's the manufacturer, on the record, saying, "We don't know." There's a version of this story where that's the whole story. 4 trucks built for a show that mattered, 3 gone, full stop. But the 4th one moved differently. The original 1974 truck, the double sleeper, the one the series built its identity around, was retired from production in 1975 when Kenworth supplied new trucks for Season 2. It went back to work on the road. Over the following decades, it passed through 7 or 8 owners. The number isn't certain. Each new owner made the truck their own, different engines installed as the original wore out, different configurations, different paint schemes applied over whatever came before. The green faded under other colors. The Aero logos disappeared. The lettering on the doors, S. Pruitt, both sides, went under the layers along with everything else. The truck didn't stop existing, it just stopped being recognizable. For the purposes of the show's history, that amounted to the same thing. It was out there somewhere doing what trucks do with no visible connection to what it had once been. By the time it surfaced, it was coming out of Wyoming. If the name Paul Sagehorn sounds familiar, it should. He's based in Sparta, Wisconsin. He's an owner-operator, a restorer, a man who has spent a significant portion of his adult life locating trucks that television and film history produced and then forgot about. He already knew the Movin On truck was out there somewhere. He'd been aware of it for years. He wasn't actively hunting it. He had other projects, other trucks, other restoration work in progress. Then one night in early 2006, he was on eBay, browsing for Movin On memorabilia, and the truck appeared in the listings. A week-long auction, coming out of Wyoming. He told Overdrive magazine what happened next. "I wasn't looking for it. I already knew it was out there, and one night I was on eBay looking for memorabilia, and there it was. I said, I don't need it, but I want it." He bought it in March 2006, paid just under $10,000. There's something worth sitting with in the mechanics of that moment. The truck had been on the road for 30 years, passing through owner after owner, each one painting over the last. Whatever it had been was buried under decades of use. And it found its way to the one person in the country who understood what it was and what it would cost to bring it back. Not through any preservation effort, not through a studio archive or a museum acquisition, but through an eBay listing on a quiet night by a man who happened to be paying attention. The restoration began with the frame. Sandblasted down, repainted. Then the cab. Layer by layer, the accumulated history of 30 years of ownership came off. When they got down to the doors, both of them, the original lettering was still there. S. Pruitt. Both sides. Never removed, just painted over again and again by every owner who came after. The name had been there the entire time, through all of it, waiting under whatever color the truck happened to be wearing that decade. The restoration returned it to its 1974 appearance. Green paint, arrow logos, S. Pruitt on the doors, back where it had always been, visible again for the first time in decades. In 2018, the truck was shown publicly at the Great American Truck Show. Kenworth's own retrospective on the show notes that the truck had been through 7 or 8 owners and multiple engine replacements by the time Sagehorn acquired it. The restoration, they note, was a process of returning it to something as close to its original 1974 condition as possible. What they don't note, what no official account fully captures, is what it meant that the name was still there. 30 years, layered under paint applied by people who may not have known or cared what they were painting over, and Sonny Pruitt was still on those doors. Here's the other thing that survived. Not in a shop in Wisconsin, not in steel and paint and original lettering. This one survived in language, which is harder to track and impossible to fully account for. During the show's run, real truckers on CB would say they were going to do it like Pruitt. It was shorthand for a particular way of operating, the independent spirit, the willingness to take on a difficult load, the ethos of the owner-operator who answers to nobody but the road. The phrase was specific enough to mean something and vague enough to travel. When the show ended, the phrase shifted. Do it like Pruitt used to do it, past tense now, an acknowledgement that something was gone, folded into the language itself. The official Movin On website, managed by the show's original producers, states that the phrase can still be heard decades later, spoken by drivers who are too young to know where it came from. This is reported rather than independently documented, but it comes from people with direct knowledge of how the show traveled through the industry. And it tracks with something true about how language works in closed communities. A phrase that useful doesn't die when its source does. It gets passed along, context stripped away, until it becomes just part of how things are said. The CB merchandise tie-in from the show, walkie-talkies marketed to children, operating on CB Channel 14, has been confirmed. The show knew what it was doing with that craze. It arrived in 1974 before C.W. McCall's Convoy hit #1 in January 1976. It was an early and significant presence in the cultural moment that made CB radio a mainstream phenomenon. Not the spark exactly, but the dry tinder that was already there when the spark landed. The phrase outlasted all of it. The show, the craze, the trucks. 3 of them gone entirely, the 4th buried under paint in Wyoming. The phrase kept moving. 2 things made it out of Movin On. One of them is in Sparta, Wisconsin. Green paint, arrow logos, S. Pruitt on both doors, back where it belongs. Paul Sagehorn bought it for under $10,000 on a quiet night in 2006 because he was the kind of person who was always going to be paying attention when it mattered. Nobody asked him to. No studio funded the restoration, no preservation society flagged it as culturally significant. He just knew what it was. The other one is still out there on the channels, in the mouths of drivers who couldn't tell you where it came from. Do it like Pruitt used to do it. A phrase that has outlived the show that made it, the craze that spread it, and 3 of the 4 trucks that gave it its name. One survived in a place you can find on a map. One survived the way certain things do. Not by being kept, but by being useful enough that nobody ever quite let it go. Nobody required either of those things to happen. They just did.